Hi, I'm Jamie.
I'm Jen.
Welcome to our podcast, All Things Unbroken.
Life breaks us in ways we never expect, but God rebuilds us in ways we could never imagine.
So come hang with us as we talk about relationships, motherhood, wellness, grief, recovery,
and the slow, beautiful process of becoming unbroken.
Hi, cousin.
Hello, cousin.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm excited
Ready?
because today we're going to get into the beginnings of your journey.
The life.
The life. So what I was thinking is maybe we could start at the very beginning. If you wanted to share a little bit about the adoption and childhood and all that good stuff.
Okay, that sounds good. And you can ask me questions because I think I told you earlier, I was like, it was so long ago and I haven't talked about this in a long time. So I was adopted in 1983 from Korea. I always used to give that as a fun fact at things because some people didn't know. It's like, what's a fun fact? So I was born right outside Seoul, Korea. It wasn't actually in Seoul, a little town outside of it. I'm told this, my dad always told me the story. And I was born in June of 1983. And for so many years, actually, until recently, I thought that I was like born in like a little space and they took me to the hospital and got rid of me. I always knew like my biological mom was very young and they knew nothing about my biological dad. And so I knew she was young and that's all I knew. But the story that I found out recently, because my brother actually had an old box of my adoption stuff and gave it to me like a couple of years ago, was that my biological mother I actually was born in a hospital in Korea, and she had me for a couple years. No, sorry, couple years. She had me for like a couple hours, and then I was given to foster care. So I was in the hospital and I was taken to like a foster home. And then there was an orphanage there, and they worked with kids, and they put out that I was for adoption. My mom and dad were in Oklahoma at the time, and this is back in 1983, so a little bit different than now, I think, for adoption processes. But they could no longer have any children after my brother. Funny story there. He'll love it. I tell this. They thought he was a girl, and
I never heard this.
Yeah, you didn't know this?
He would hate this. Yeah.
He's 4 years older than me. So he was born, late 70s or, 79. I don't know. Maybe, yeah, he's 4 years. And so back then, like my mom was in labor with him. My adopted mom was in labor. All the things happened, like days in, whatever. Finally, they had to do a C-section and they had him, and they found out he was not a girl. He was a boy. And I may be telling the story wrong, so maybe I should go fact check it. Maybe I should go fact check it.
It's fun.
But anyways, I really think that is the story. But regardless, after him, my mom could not have any more children. It was just a whole thing. So, and they always wanted a little girl as well, right? So, my dad always had a heart for like the Asian culture. He was in Vietnam War. He had a heart for like missions, whatever. They were somewhere one time. And again, this is a story that I was told, but they were somewhere and they saw a little Korean girl running around. And my mom was like, oh my gosh, like let's adopt a baby from Korea. Long story short, they started the paperwork. They sent it off. They got in touch with adoption agency. And I was flown over on a plane when I was 3 months old to Oklahoma City.
Wow.
That was a long story for that. I was 3 months old on a plane. And you know what's even more
Wow.
funny is they would do updates to my parents like once a month or whatever. And in one of the updates, which we can get into this later, they said like 2 months old, like has a bad temper. How do you know?
Let's mark that
looking
down in capital letters. But honestly, my mind goes straight to like nervous system. You didn't have all the bonding with the mama. You were taken somewhere else. Like your nervous system was probably a wreck for starters.
And then also you hear now that we know now, like, as a baby, a fetus, like they feel all the things. So as a child, like, if she didn't want me to, from the beginning, Like, and that
Mm,
explains a lot later on in my adult life of abandonment and things, by the way, that I'm like, oh, that makes sense now. Okay. You know what I mean? So I don't just feel like I'm
yeah.
just temperamental, throwing a fit lady. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, so I was brought over here at 3 months old. My brother was the first one to hold me at the airport. He was the first one to ever hold me.
Oh. So
Um,
the adoption
yeah,
people like carried you on the plane and brought you and then just like
I
handed you to
probably screamed the whole
this
time.
little
No, I was kidding. I
4-year-old
don't know.
white boy.
Yeah. So I'm sure he had help, but
Oh, now I know.
they had him hold me with my parents. And
Oh,
again, a lot of this is coming from memory that I haven't talked about forever. But pretty soon after they had me, they moved from to a smaller town. My dad got a job, and I was raised in a small town in Oklahoma, and I lived there until I was 20 years old. So we
yeah.
can pause. Yeah. So I was middle class family living in small town Oklahoma. I was. It was funny because as I got older, my dad had people that worked with them and they're like, hey, when did you tell Jennifer that she was adopted? And my dad was a jokester. He's like, oh, we still haven't. And I'm like, me.
You
I've
should have looked
always
in the
just
mirror.
know, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I've always just known the story and they were very good. Like I've just known, I've been telling my adoption story since I was could talk. I was always
Yeah.
like, we chose you from
Mm,
Korea. I used to joke with my brother because there was one point that I found out when I was younger, like when you're adopted, like it is legal, like you cannot give that child up. He's
yeah.
like, but you can your own children. So I get my brother and I would be like, yeah, they chose me. They could still get rid of you. I'm just kidding. I would be,
That's
well,
great. I
yeah.
love it. I
So
love it. Well, I like how it was kind of like a lighthearted, like fun, like, and that really is, I don't know, I kind of hear it in my head tying into the gospel of like, you were chosen, like you were very specifically chosen. And that's pretty cool.
yeah, so that's
My
that
parents were
story.
stuck with me. So
No, they could have given you up for adoption. I'm just kidding. I
true,
didn't.
true. Well,
But
that's
growing up,
interesting.
go
Okay.
ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think now, like you said, this was the 80s. Things are so different. I think now, and in my head, I always pictured like they went over there to like visit and like met you or saw you or like, I don't know, nothing like
I
that. It
think
was just
that
like
different
3 months, boom.
cultures, yeah, and you're on a plane, this little baby, came over here, and I was temperamental growing up. I know your parents will tell stories. I've been told stories, which also, by the way, being told that your whole life, that will also create your own thing
Yeah.
as you get older. Had a good life though. Like it was, we moved to a small town. Had a lot of friends growing up. We were in the very involved in church. Um, you were born a few years later. We'd see, our families would see each other in the summertime. Um, so that's kind of just, I went to same grade school up until sixth grade, went to middle school, was involved in all the things, just typical middle class family in Oklahoma. And looking back now, I was actually with some high school friends. I'm still friends with some of my high school friends. We get together like once every other year, a group of us. And, looking back, I was one of the only Asian students in school. There was like an Asian family that had like, I think the donut shop and maybe like a Chinese food restaurant. And like, I never felt different. There was a time when I was in, I think, grade school, and someone called me a name that was racist. I don't know if I could say it or not. Can I say it on here? I mean, I guess I can, right? It's not
We can
like
cut it if
a
we need
bad
to.
word. They called me a chink, and
Oh,
I had no idea what that was. And my brother was older, and he did. I can tell the story; it's not that bad. And he said, he's like in seventh grade. I'm like in third. I don't know, whatever, third grade. He's like, well, so I was telling him about it, and he's like, yeah, well, you go call them a cracker. So this kid, he was actually went to church with us, and I went. He said, and he
this
always
was
like
the
teased
90s,
me.
like,
This
or
was the 90s. It was the
late 80s,
90s.
early 90s. Yeah.
Right. But I had no idea. And I did it. And he went home crying and told his parents on me.
Oh,
And I remember, I know. And then, but it all got sorted out because they figured out what was going on.
yeah.
And it was fine. But that's the only stint of like difference that I had growing up. And it's kind of interesting
Yeah.
being in a small town in Oklahoma. Anyway, that's
I
that.
remember hearing your brother, or I heard a story about your brother where, so I guess sometime after you got here, they had like a ceremony because I did see it on VHS, and that would be wonderful if we could
Oh,
find
yeah.
it. Do you have it? Do you have the
Yeah, I don't
VHS?
know. I don't think
Somebody
so. I
has
have a
that, I'm
box of
sure.
things. But they call
Well,
it being like Americanized or naturalization is when you become a naturalized citizen or
Yes.
citizen.
And so when you got done, I remember your brother had asked, why do her eyes still look the same? Because you were supposed to be Americanized or
So
something.
right. So after I had been here like a year or two, because I was old enough to like sit up by this point, because I remember I was waving a flag. I was waving American flags.
Yeah.
I went to court. It was actually on the news,
Yes.
and we all got naturalization papers, became a U.S. citizen. So my brother was with
Yes.
my grandparents, my mom's parents, and they're like, "Oh, your sister's gonna go become an American citizen." You know, he's at this time probably like 5, maybe, I don't know. And I came back, and I walk in, or I don't walk in, I'm in the door, and he's looking at me. He's looking at my parents. He's like, "Yeah, why are her eyes still do this?" And that's a good story because he was
Do you
thinking,
think it's because they said Americanized?
"Yeah, became
I
an
always thought it
American."
was
Oh,
just
maybe.
because, you know what I mean? Like as a 4 year
Yeah.
old, you probably heard like American eyes. She's going to come back from this thing with American
Oh,
eyes.
I don't know. We'll have to ask him
Anyway,
about that and some of
yeah.
these stories too. But I'm pretty sure they thought at some point, going back to that, that he was at some point they thought he was going to be a girl. I mean, also this is back in the '80s. They don't have what they have now, right? They don't. There's not the
Right. I feel like that probably happened a lot back then because the
or
technology
'70s.
not that great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, you don't know what you don't
Anyway.
know. Surprise! But that's how I came to the United States of America, and that's how we are here right
Yeah.
now speaking. So,
And
everything was pretty yeah.
I remember when you were a kid, I think they had you in like viola lessons or things like that. Like,
Hmm. I was in the viola. I played basketball through junior high a little bit. I'm not coordinated, but I was in orchestra. I did all the normal things that the kids did. I was very involved. My parents were very involved. My mom was in PTA. She actually stayed home with us, and she would have other kids come to the house, like take them to school and stuff for extra money. Dad had a full time job. We were a very typical middle class family, and that happened. I would say middle school, junior high happened. And then I just not to jump over, it was when I was kind of 15 that I remember 14, 15, that my world all of a sudden looked different. And I remember at some point in the middle, my dad came to us letting us know like something happened with his job. I think someone came and
mm,
bought the company and they brought new managers. He still had a job. And at that point, I think at some point within my early teenage years, my mom started having depression. She started like doing things that were different. It was after her hysterectomy, I believe, that I started noticing like she would stay in bed longer. She would do those
mm,
things, you know. Um, and then I remember very vividly, like at some point, we actually had to file for bankruptcy at some point. I don't remember exactly when, because she started spending more money and being depressed.
mm,
And it was when I was 15 years old. I would specifically remember this time because she had like gone on a weekend by herself or something. And I remember I was going out. My dad was dropping me and my then had a little boyfriend, which by the way, 15 with a boyfriend, I look at like, well, even like your kid. And I'm like, oh gosh, no. But anyways, at the
let's not talk
time,
about that.
let's move on. No, but
Yeah.
and we were like, it was like he was like my first, my first boyfriend. Anyway, we were going, he specifically remember being in the back seat, we're driving there and him in the car telling me, I need to tell you something. Your mom has depression
Mm,
and we're going to get her help. And this is 1998. And I'm like, that is when I don't, the reason I describe that moment is because we went, and from that moment, I remember my world like shifted from that moment on.
yeah.
And we can kind of pause and say, because I don't want to skip over anything if you have questions about it. But yeah, that's when I remember specifically like everything kind of just changed. And I remember going to this, like, was a get together at a friend's house. And the boy at the time, he was also my best friend. And we all had a really good close friend group. We went to church together. And I didn't really tell anyone else besides him, I don't think, besides like maybe one other friend of that journey. So I literally kind of just kept
Yeah.
it and started dealing with things and her appointments. And yeah, we can kind of,
Yeah.
that changed fast. But
No,
yeah,
it's good. Well, it
yeah,
sounds like up to that point, you were adopted, you were from this whole other world, you were chosen, you were brought in. But it sounds like up to that point, you were just kind of like raised and grew up like every other kid around you. And I know you always
sure.
had like a lot of friends, you always had friend groups. So, I mean, I wasn't there a whole lot, but from the outside looking in, it seemed like everyone accepted you. Like you weren't different, like
Yeah.
you were just
No.
part of the town. Like, um, so, and it does make me wonder if a lot of what happened was probably hormone related, but they didn't have like with your mom, they didn't have like the support back then. And that breaks my heart also.
Yeah, I think that, and also just knowing now what I know about her family, we do think that like my great grandmother had depression.
Mm,
Of course, that was back in the Great Depression. I mean, that was a long time ago.
yeah.
Um, but I will say, when this all happened, you know, she had a circle that she let know, but I just watched her from like 15 to like 18. Like some friends came and went, and we told people, like people, Nanny, we
Mm,
told Nanny, which is our grandmother, she is the actually probably the only person, our grandma, which is my mom's mother in law, Nanny, they were super, I don't know, they were super close. Like Nanny would come down in the summers and like take care of my mom in her depression. And
mhm,
she knew, like even her own parents, which looking back now, there's been some
mm.
things then with some things that happened. It's like, why didn't you tell us? We also just were living with it. We didn't know back then the things. I mean, some
Nobody
church people
talked about it.
knew, they prayed. We went to church. She would lay in bed, and I'm telling you, she would get up. And I was very involved in school. In eighth grade, I was part of like different organizations. She would always show up for the dances. She would always show up to decorate. You know, I was a football trainer, and then I like all my orchestra stuff. And then when I got my junior and senior, I was involved like junior class uh, secretary, senior class vice president. We did prom and like all these things. She showed up, and she started having to be hospitalized during this time. So she'd have to literally go to the mental health ward for weekends at a time. When I started driving, I would just do my thing. I would go visit her, and I would just go back. And I really didn't talk to like anyone about it besides like my boyfriend at the time. And then like maybe a couple close friends, and people knew something was wrong, but no one like knew what that was. And like looking back now at that age, going through that, that's when I kind of grew up, I think. And my
Mm,
dad was amazing. He tried everything with her. He would take her to appointments. He would, we tried experimental things. Like it got really bad during that time. My brother was out of the house at that time too, so he didn't really know. Um, I actually the reason I chose the college I did is because I wanted to stay home with her for a couple of years because I was afraid she was going to do something. Because we did have a couple times, a couple of scares where she would like take too many pills or the things. And looking back now, I was talking to a friend about it. I just, we all grew up at different stages of our lives. And that's just when my life kind of changed and I saw the world a little
yeah.
bit differently is at that age.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, and you mentioned it was like 1998-ish.
Right.
People
Like
didn't
around that.
know. I mean, it was Oklahoma. We didn't really have the internet. We didn't have the resources. People didn't really talk about, it was very like hush hush. People didn't like to talk about their problems. People don't know what to do, which we've kind of talked about that before. But then when your dad told you that at 15, did you even know what it
I,
meant?
I don't think so. And I know I described this car scene. Like it's just like something that sticks out in my head. No, I didn't. And I don't think I still didn't even know, even like, because years later, the reason I started fighting so hard years later is after she was gone, because then I piqued my interest. But it wasn't until, like I said recently, until I went through it that I like was like, oh my gosh, like she was the strongest person that I think I know because she lived with depression
Hmm.
for 15 years.
Yeah.
That's a long time to live with it. I do want to get into that topic of that because I think that so many times, and even now, even with what we know now about it, it's so easy to be like the self-help, the therapy, all the things like, and not really like truly be empathetic to someone who's going through like, I can't get up, I
Yeah.
can't move. And to someone who's not been through that or not felt it, it is very hard. But that's why whenever I started kind of advocating later on in life, I found organizations like NAMI, which is a big organization that helps with like mental health resources for free
Mm,
for the community. I feel like she just felt so alone in it, and it was a chemical imbalance. Obviously, now looking back, it may have been some different things besides just depression. What we know now. Um, but she used to tell me when I got a little bit older because that she's like, you were my angel. They came over from Korea. And
Mhm.
I never understood what she meant but it's because like my dad and her became her support system to where we're like, okay, where's your
Mhm.
mom? What's this? Like, what's going on? And we can talk about, she had one suicide attempt that we did not think she was, I thought she was gone when I was 20. Like, and that's when all y'all kind of find out, I think, how deep it was. But
Yeah.
we lived for about 5 years of kind of just not speaking about it. And we just lived it. It's kind of like you look back and you just kind of live through it. And mom may be in bed for a week, but she always got up and showed up for when I needed her to like help me with the school dance.
Yeah.
And she was there for the graduation, with my dad. And he, bless his heart, like he was just trying to work as hard as he could to make sure she was okay. He'd still go to church every Sunday and hand out bulletins. And then she would come to the church. And then he was just a whole, looking back now, I think I actually spoke at a school one time about like, what do you wish you would have done differently, if knowing with your
Mhm.
mom's depression. And it's like, I wish my dad and I would have gone to her therapy with her and been involved in her treatment. And anyone that's listening, if you have a family member that you are close to that is trying to get help and that you're helping them, I would suggest going with them to the therapist, going with them through the treatment. And not all the time, but being there. We would take her to appointments, and I never once went to any therapy sessions with her. And like I wish I would
Yeah.
have. Yeah.
That was just the approach back then, was like
Like she's gonna go
kind of
get
like
help.
going to the
And
doctor, going to the dentist, like you go sit in the chair and I'll wait out here kind of thing. It's so different now. Yeah.
yeah.
So
So
you talked a little bit about how when that happened, it was like this shift, and that's when you really had to grow up. So it sounds like from that point on, yes, she showed up for the things, but she was not like that traditional mom from that point on. And in a lot of ways, you kind of became the caretaker, even though you were the kid. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
yeah. Yeah, that kind of got me a little emotional there whenever you
I'm
said it
sorry.
like that. No, don't be sorry. I just didn't know, me and you've never talked about this, I don't think so. This is this is raw. Um, I don't know. I mean, it just happened. Like you look at your life. We all have lives. We all have things we go through, and you just kind of, it's just part of your life. Like you don't, I didn't question it. I just became this little person. I just always made sure she was okay.
Mm,
My dad worked, he worked, and I knew they struggled financially, I think a little bit after that happened. And I worked, she also had a part-time job. She had a really good, amazing people that were in our lives that worked with her, and her job, knew she actually was for insurance agent, and I worked part-time there. And then I got my own job, and they helped me where they could, but a lot of it was for her treatment. So we actually did start, she did like electric shock therapy. They did some
mm,
experimental things that we drive her to just to help her with the balance. I mean, this woman tried, and she went to church on Sundays, and my dad prayed, and we prayed, and we did all the things that you could possibly do to help her. Um, but I just did it. I didn't think about it. It wasn't something, like, looking back now, that made me emotional for a second, because like just thinking of what we had to go through. Like I said, my normal weeks or months were, I would once a month for a long time go up to the hospital and visit her and sign in and come home. That was just, and I didn't talk about it. I think people that were closer, some people I would talk about things with, but like it just wasn't, it was just part of my life. It was just like you get up and you smile. My dad, you know him. We just love people. He's volunteering and doing the things. He's just trying to survive too. He's going to church, being with the youth group. They're trying to raise me. And she would have really good days too. Like she'd have really good weeks. I don't want people to think that she sat around just depressed. She was just full of life. And she was like that until even the end. But just the internal battle that she had to face alone and not have the support. Like now we have, I just told you about, no, I mean, other groups and organizations and support groups. Like we had none of that there. Um, but yeah, that was just kind of part of do you have any specific questions? Sorry, I don't know if that answered anything, but it was just like, you just did it. Like looking
yeah.
back, if I could tell that little girl anything, being 15 to 20, it's like, hey, you're gonna be okay. And this, I think that part of my life helped prepare me for this part that I just walked through, and being able to step up when I was depressed and I was grieving, and being a mom to my little girl, because it helped me know that I could do that. Right. Like, and I thought about her a lot during obviously the last almost 5 years of being a mom. Like I thought about her a lot, and I've missed her because we were super close. and there's recipes that I don't have. And I actually have her cookbook, and my daughter found it the other day and like opened it. And but I think that period of my life of being that 15 to 20 year old resilient little girl that always didn't make the right decisions, right? But like helped me become who I am now, and helped me to be able to stand up and make different decisions and know, also be compassionate to how she felt because she was going through depression, right? It helped me like full circle moment, like become who I am. So when I did have hard days, when I had days that I didn't want to get up, I would think about her and be like, okay, let's go. And that's also what created the race and all those things. And like the inspiration for that is just like the don't quit mentality, like
Mm.
came from her. And it taught me to be resilient, and it taught me to be compassionate, and it taught me never to judge a book by its cover, because we hid her depression for a lot of years from a lot of people. And people just probably thought like my mom was being cranky or I was being snotty or, whatever. So
Right.
that's,
Yeah. Well,
that
thank
answer your
you
question.
for sharing
Yeah.
all of that. Yes, it did answer my question. I keep going back, and maybe we need to describe for like maybe younger listeners the mindset back then. People didn't walk around very aware of like their weight and burdens and emotions and like how things were impacting them. You just kind of like, we just did life, we just kind of lived it. And then later we learned all these things. And looking back, we reflect and we're like, oh, that's what was going on. That's why I felt this way. But nobody knew the things back then. It was just like, especially in Oklahoma, you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you go through your day.
Yeah.
And so I can imagine, you talked about two pretty heavy things that could have been traumatic to your nervous system, how you operate in your mind. And so I think in sharing your journey, I think those are two really important points because, like you said, a lot of that does tie into other choices and just different things throughout your life. And so thank you for
Sure.
sharing all of that.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me talk about it.
Yeah.
Like I haven't talked about it in a while. Um, so we went through, I guess I can continue telling that a little bit, and then we can, I don't know how much more we want to get into, but throughout high school, I was involved. We talked about that. And then you move on, and I will talk, we can kind of go through this. She had a suicide attempt when I was in my sophomore year. And I think that's kind of the first, I say that's the first thing that changed, but also like the reality of her depression was when I was 20 years old. And at this time, it had been almost 5 years, I guess, since it all happened. And looking back, some of the decisions I made during my high school years, like everything was pretty, like I would say stable. Like I had a high school boyfriend for a long time. But then, like my senior year, I kind of like of high school, I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was because something was about to change. We're going off to college, like whatever. I kind of remember like losing my head a little bit. Like I remember feeling very like I was going to be stuck or something.
Mm.
And I remember, and and I'm going to talk about this because it's just part of my journey, but the way that I treated like people I dated or my boyfriends was not always nice. Not that I was mean, I was just very like, I would push people away, but want them close. And
Hmm.
that probably has to do a lot with the abandonment now that I know what I know. So I had a
Yeah.
boyfriend through high school, like all through like ninth grade through almost 12th. And there were some things that happened. We were immature. He was my first love. But I remember like specifically one day, all of a sudden, I was just like, after 3 years, like, I don't want to be with you. And I started then my journey of, I would say, like unhealthy relationships. We'll just kind
Mm.
of leave it at that. And so he went off to college. I stayed, home and did the thing. We can fast forward. I was going to a junior college, getting my associate's degree. And during that 2 years, I did not make all the best decisions in life. Um, I don't really know what between that made it happen. I don't know if it was because I was like also becoming of age and I was home with my mom and I was kind of the mom
Hmm.
making decisions, but also my dad was working. So we were like, all the things were happening. Um, and then when remember, it was during like spring break of my sophomore year. I come home and my dad is opening every single cabinet in the house. And oh, I didn't tell you this time, I also had gotten a part time job at a psychologist office because my goal
Hmm.
back then, I am my mom's help. I'm going to go into psychology. That was what I was doing back then. So I came home from work that day because I worked, college in the work thing. And I remember his face was pale. I'm like, what happened? Like, what is going on? Because at this point, there had not been like a suicide attempt. She had taken some pills and she had told us the things, and there's like a whole thing there. You always worry, and then everything's okay, and then go to the hospital. And he was like, something is going on with your mom. The therapist called me, and your mom left, and she thinks she's going to do something. And so this is in
Mm-hmm.
the afternoon. So my dad and I drove for 10 hours all over the city looking for my mom and did not find her. We got back home. And I remember talking, my dad and I were super close. I was daddy's girl, we were super close. And I remember the feeling like something is wrong. Like, what are we going to do? I don't really know if we had told y'all yet. I think that he had called Nanny. Um, but I remember that night coming home, and then we got home and we had not slept. And then that next morning, really early, we got a call, and they're like, "We have your wife. We have your wife. She's unconscious. She lost oxygen to her brain." And it was like a code blue. Is that what the right word is? It was
I
whatever
don't
that
know.
is. And I remember going to the hospital with my dad. And this is the first time I think I'd ever seen him cry. And I remember walking into the hospital and the nurses were crying. And I remember him going and getting on his knees and like just like holding her hand and saying, "Please wake up." And she was gone. And I remember they got her like stabilized and put on a ventilator and took her up. And it's just like, then we had to call all y'all. Like, I don't remember where you all, do you remember this? Do you remember us calling you and letting you know? Yeah. And then all of a sudden it was like, we had to call her parents. And you have to remember, a lot of people didn't know like we didn't know she was
The
going to do that, but
depth of
no
it.
one knew like the depth. And so all of a sudden you have her parents showing up, and then you have Nanny and everyone's showing up, and then her parents are mad. My dad for not letting them know. And then it was like this
Mm.
whole thing. My brother and his wife, um, and they had I don't know if my youngest niece was born, but my older one, were they married? Yeah. 2020. Yeah. They were all, anyways, everyone was coming and being like, what is going on? And then you have my dad and me here, like, oh, this has been happening and it was this whole thing. And it got to the point at the hospital where you're on the ventilator for 24 hours, no brain activity, 48 hours, no brain. After 72 hours, they're like, okay, do you want to take her off life support? So we were in a meeting, my dad, my brother, it was just the three of us. And I think her parents were there. And I remember telling them, and may sound horrible to some people, but I said, she does not want to be here. She has been suffering at this point. It had been 5, 6 years, right? And I go, I think that we let her go. And if we do and she lives, that is a sign. And I'm saying that, and I kind of feel guilty for saying that, but that is just how I felt. Other people in the family did not agree.
Well, you had seen it firsthand for years too. So you had a way different perspective.
Yes. And I remember we decided to keep her on. And then I remember at some point in the middle of that, my dad and I, you know how like sometimes the hospitals have like fire alarms and like they shut all the doors.
Mhm.
I remember there was a time me and my dad were with her and we sat down outside and the doors had shut. So we're like up in the hospital wing and we're sitting there. I remember sitting beside him and just sitting with him. And at the time we were talking about stuff, and he was a very, very faithful Christian man. He is the reason I have my faith. He is the reason that I know what faith looks like, is because of my dad. And I said, I don't really know why this is happening, but I go, I just, I'm okay because I have you. And then I said, I don't know if it was mom or my brother. Like, like they need us. So I was like, if something happens, like I know that we'll be okay. And I go, and I know, and he was like, we will be. And he looked at me, he's like, we will be okay, no matter what. And I knew that if I had him, that I would be okay. And I know he'd be okay because he had me. We're to take care of each other, like, my 20-year-old self. Well, within a day or two of that, a miracle happens and she wakes up.
Thank you guys so much for joining us today. We truly hope this episode has touched your heart.
If someone came to mind while you were listening, please feel free to share this with them.
And if you have any questions or feedback for us, you can reach us at allthingsunbrokenpodcast@gmail.com.
Have an awesome day.